Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 35 as we continue with our awesome foursome looking at the second row, and this week with George Kruis, aka Kruiso. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hi guys, thanks for joining us again. I'm here as always with Dan, who is also hosting today's show once again. I think we're looking at George Kruis, is that right, Dan?
That's right, yeah, absolutely. We carry on with the sort of powerhouse four in Moreau, and obviously we've done Courtney Big Goose Laws last time, and this week it's George Edward J. Kruis, aka Kruiso.
Kruiso.
probably not the most original.
Yeah, I was going to say. Isn't that the one that, when you can't think of a nickname, you stick an O on the end of their surname?
Yeah, pretty much.
Isn't that right, Wood?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it, mate.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I'm saying George Kruis. It's actually, interesting enough, there's a lot of articles about him. With regards to sort of his personal life, it seems to be the sort of information you get on his personal life is sort of interesting. So, for example, I know a hell of a lot about his dog named Four, who's a 2-year-old or soon to be 2-year-old Vizsla, but very little about his parents or brothers or sisters, who he seems less keen to talk about. But,
his dog's named Four, as in the number.
No, sorry. I think you're referring to my to my speech impediment here, which is always good fun to take the mick out of. It's only been 35 years of non-stop abuse for that. So,
as in the Norse god.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Good name.
I don't think we need to mention his name again. But yeah, so George Kruis, he's born 22nd of February 1990, which makes him 27 now and would make him 29 come the Rugby World Cup, which is probably a great age for the second row to be actually come a World Cup.
Good experience.
He's a towering 6'6" and now around 18 stone 5. I'll go into a bit more detail about weight actually, because that was something that sort of throughout his career has been an issue. He was born in Guildford in Surrey. He attended St John's Leatherhead School, which is actually quite well known rugby school. They've also had the likes of sort of Richard Horton, who was also a Saracens player. He went to the University of Hertfordshire, and he played his youth rugby since age 9 for Dorking Rugby Club. He's at Dorking, actually. It was interesting. So he was he didn't really come into his own in rugby till he was a bit older, because quite frankly, he was just really sort of skinny and lanky. And actually, when he first started first got his trial at Saracens Academy, he was still around 6'6", but only 90 kilograms. I mean that's nothing for someone 6'6".
That's less than I weigh, and I'm 6'2".
Yeah,
I think that is really skinny.
Yeah, that's really lanky, and it wasn't till actually around sort of 17, 18, where typically blokes tend to sort of start bulking up a bit anyway, but actually he probably became known as a bit of a rugby player. His Dorking team that year, their under-17s, they won the National Under-17s Cup, which team actually interestingly also included the Surrey and England cricketer Jason Roy. Okay. But he, as a result of that, then sort of had really good years within his school first 15, went on to captain Surrey under-18s, and then also got into the sort of Southeast team. Before then, he'd played rugby, but he hadn't really been known as somebody who was likely to be he certainly wasn't getting people thinking this is a future international. There's actually an article which seems a bit harsh, but the title of the article is "From Skinny No Hoper to England International." I think that does seem a bit harsh.
That is harsh. So yeah, what was the article? Where was the article from?
It was actually interesting. It was in the Telegraph.
Okay.
So it was, and this was around about his first full England cap.
Okay, so
And
but yeah, I don't know. It seems a bit harsh to refer to him that way, and I guess as well, it's just saying to people, if you want to be successful in rugby, you just got to go and get massive, which of course isn't necessarily the case. I suppose for the second row, it probably is quite important.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it was them having a dig at him. I think it was more sort of that was a general consensus because it's obviously done in speech marks. So I'd imagine they've probably quoted someone as that rather than them deciding to sort of name him as a skinny no-hoper. But
well, hopefully that was the way he described himself.
Well, let's hope so, yeah, because it'd be quite harsh for them to sort of come up with that name by himself.
Not sure I'd want to say something like that to his face.
No, certainly not now. I mean, now he's colossal, man. Like he's huge, and he still says now he still sort of struggles with his diet. I mean, he'll eat sort of 4 meals a day and snack in between, and he still probably hasn't found that right weight, which is optimal for him. And these are his own words, that right weight, but it's optimal for him as the second row. So, obviously it's about sort of matching up that sort of speed and dynamism along with having that bulk and strength to go with it. But I think he's getting there or thereabouts, but he certainly, so he had his first, because initially he was sort of following school, he went to University of Hertfordshire, where he actually met who is now his best mate, Jamie George. So both at 18, they were playing together since the University of Hertfordshire. And apparently the first time they met was on the University of Hertfordshire third 15 artificial pitch. Whether that means they both played for the third 15, I very much doubt. But that's the first time they met during a line-out practice, and they're, to this day, best mates.
Cool. Maybe it was like a Kings, like we had at UWE.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly something along those lines. But that's when he really, I think, sort of started becoming sort of more noticeable. Although, so initially after he sort of had the times at school, he was starting to bulk up a bit, played for the county, sort of played for the Southeast, but he'd sort of, got in touch with Quins, or he was got in touch with Quins, and they weren't interested. They didn't really see him as a potential.
Oops.
And yeah, exactly. I think that's probably something they regret now. But Saracens were much same. It was actually his school coach who got in touch with Saracens and said, look, this guy's worth a look at. And Saracens initially, and George Kruis says he jokes about it with the coaches now, were quite sceptical, especially as on his first training session. He ended up sort of cutting his knee during scrummaging and was out for 6 weeks. So they were to start with. Yeah, to start with, they're a bit like who is this beanpole? How is he adding that much? Is he adding that much value to us? But he's, since then, obviously now that's something they joke about. And it took his time to prove himself. So when he went along, there was definitely sort of, fairly high levels of skepticism around him as a player and whether he'd ever be good enough to make it, something which obviously since then he's proved them wrong, as he's since 2009 when he sort of officially joined Saracens, he's had 91 first team appearances and 5 tries for them. And actually since 2009, his career's gone, you can just see the improvements. So 2010 represented England under 20s. 2013 got his first England A cap, or England Saxons as we know. And his first England cap was actually later than I thought. 2014 was his first England cap.
I was going to say, he's one of those guys that you think of him now and you think of, he's one of those people that has got to be there or thereabouts, an immediate name on the team sheet, although we'll obviously come on to the implications of that for England. But he kind of appeared quite suddenly. I don't remember sort of being aware of George Kruis, this fringe player who was working his way into the England team. It's almost like I don't remember when it was, but it was almost like he was suddenly just a big part of the England setup. Yeah,
it came about via injury. So I think it was I can't remember because at the time when they were first talking, it was very much Laws and Launchbury
Yeah.
who had sort of nailed down. And this was obviously before sort of Maro Itoje was on the scene.
Yeah, of course.
Laws and Launchbury. And then there were the likes of Atwood and Yules. But due to a few injuries, it's how Kruis sort of got his opportunity. And Kruis himself has had quite a few injuries in his career to contend with. But I mean, since 2014, he's got 20 caps for England, including one try. And then obviously he's now got one cap for the Lions as well.
Yeah.
Sort of from this tour. But it's really strange. What I'm finding quite strange about his sort of England cap. Firstly, I thought he'd have more caps. Like you say, he did sort of come from nowhere. But I mean, let's face it, the reason he went on the Lions tour was basically sort of money in the bank, sort of what he'd already proven from himself, which for somebody with only 20 caps.
Yeah, it's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is impressive.
And absolutely right that he went.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
He didn't necessarily have his greatest spell in a Lions shirt, but it certainly wasn't. But by no means was he poor.
No, no, not at all.
But I do think he offers. It's a difficult one. This whole this 4-way second row decision that needs to be made, because they all offer something quite different. And you're kind of happy with any combination of any four of them, which is great from a strength and depth point of view, which I think we said last week when we were talking about Courtney Laws. But they are different. So I wonder whether Eddie Jones will kind of try to define them in their various, define their differences in order to pick the team that best suits the opposition.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's interesting. It was almost a moot point because he was also eligible to play for Germany, so we could have not that I think he ever would have taken that route. But what you're saying about that, and that is an interesting. I don't know if that's Eddie Jones's style. It may well be, but yeah, it may be that Eddie Jones is just like, for this type of match, Kruis is my man. For this type of match, Launchbury is my man.
Yeah. Well, we know he's been like that in the past, doesn't he? Because he did it. He did it when we went to Australia. Was it last summer?
Yeah.
It was 3 very different games, and England obviously won all 3 of them, but in 3 very different ways. And whilst I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the differences between the teams were, I remember thinking he's picking his team based on the game plan, and the game plan is changing, so is the team.
Yeah, and I think with our second row we could do that to an extent. What I find, so when we were speaking about Big Goose last week, what we said is we think we'd probably have him, Launchbury and Itoje as the 3 match day players if we picked tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I do stick by that. However, one thing I would say, George Kruis at his best, I think would be a starter for any team in the world, All Blacks included. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily say that about Launchbury or Laws.
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? If you take all, I think we alluded to it last week, but we'll talk about it again now. We before the Lions tour, George Kruis was injured. There was talk that he was going to be fit in time for the Lions, and should he be included? And the kind of resounding answer was yes, absolutely. He's too good to leave out. He's too important in the line out for calling it, and being a kind of a leader, and all of these sort of buzzwords that get used when talking about players of this sort of caliber. And yet, because he had a couple of games where he wasn't at his best on the Lions tour, suddenly the view has changed. And because Launchbury looked great against Argentina, suddenly everyone's saying, "Oh, he's the guy." It's a really difficult one because you're talking George Kruis not his best against the best nation in the world at the moment, and you're talking Launchbury looking pretty useful against one of the poorer nations in the world, in the top tier.
Top tier world rankings.
Yeah. So, how would George Kruis have looked in an England shirt down in Argentina, and would we all be going, he's I don't know. It's a difficult one. I would say that before the Lions tour, Toje and Kruis would be your starting choice for as much as anything else, because they start week in, week out domestically together.
Yeah,
and that offers a huge advantage of knowing the way each other plays inside out, particularly at things like the line out.
And I think that's a key point, because if we're saying line out, if we are now saying that Jamie George is the starting hooker, and Kruis and Jamie George are best mates and been playing together since sort of on the uni rugby pitches since age 18, do you then want Kruis? So they would have been, for the last however many sort of, I mean, actually not that long, because they're not that old, but for the last sort of, 7 years consistently, they've been calling line-outs together and working the line-out together, and that definitely does help.
Oh, without doubt. And then you throw in Itoje as well as another one that's regularly, jumping against the same throw. So it makes sense. Itoje and Kruis makes sense on paper, and it's like you said. It's if he's on the form of his life, then if they're all on the form of their lives, apart from being a ridiculously difficult decision, I think that the advantages of playing together at Saracens just probably pips them to the first, to the starting spot, and then in that situation you then have to make the decision between Courtney Laws and who have I left out?
Joe Launchbury.
Oh, Joe Launchbury, of course. So then that takes us back to the other question that we had last week, which is that Courtney Laws, we can see him as a finisher, we can see him as an impact player. Do we see the same for Launchbury? I guess you can't. Yeah. Either one of them could do that job, but it's another reason, isn't it, to consider having all four of them involved.
Which I think is definitely an option, with sort of saying that both Itoje and Laws, Itoje and Big Goose can be back row as well. But actually, Kruiso has also played back row. A lot less so, and realistically now he's not going to be considered an international back row, but he has played back row before.
I think the advantages of that are the kind of that ability to be, instead of talking about a front five, it's almost talking about a back five in the scrum, isn't it? You've got your front three and your back five, whereas it used to be the other way around. And I think just the athleticism that comes with experience of playing in the back row is an advantage in the second row.
Yeah. And here's probably the most important question of all, actually, concerning these four. If the four of them are put in a ring, WWE style, Royal Rumble, who's the last man standing?
Ooh.
That's a toughie.
I think maybe Courtney Laws, because I think he maybe is just the most brutal of the four of them.
He is, but Kruis is pretty big. So's Laws, in fairness. And Itoje, I could just imagine Itoje going just medieval.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think when you look at what you've got to judge it on what you've seen. I haven't seen that kind of aggression from the other three. There's been plenty of it, but not the same as what you get from a firing Courtney Laws, aka Big Goose, when he lines up those hits and sort of is right on the line of what's legal, but just inside it. They're pretty special. So I don't know. I'd have to go with Laws. It would be close. It would be tight. It would be a long rumble. But
it would be a long rumble. But Laws, I can see what you mean. He'd come in wearing like skull and crossbone necklace, and it would be the skulls of like kittens he's killed that morning for breakfast or something. So you'd probably be a bit. It'd probably psych them out, and then I could see him coming through. But it's on the pitch. I can't wait to see the Autumn Internationals to see where we go with this. But that will also depend, because if Eddie Jones has alluded to resting people, one of the people you've got to think he's likely to rest, what is he? I was going to say would be maybe Itoje, but maybe Itoje's young enough where Eddie Jones is thinking, actually, he doesn't need rest. Maybe it's a few of the sort of older boys, maybe, the ones who've had season after season after season for the last however many years with no break.
I mean, part of me feels like if he thinks that they're young enough to make it to the 2019 World Cup, then they are the younger guys. If he thinks they're too old for the World Cup, then the only reason to include them is to offer experience to the young guys that are going to be involved, who maybe have less of it. I actually think the more we talk about it, the more I feel like what makes sense is to just take away some of the guys that are inked in. That if you're going to use this as a testing, as a sort of final testing ground before putting together your World Cup team, your World Cup squad, and essentially your World Cup team, your World Cup 23, then I would suggest rest the guys that are going to be involved in order to find out who your number 2 and your number 3 are.
So who are those guys who we're saying? We're saying Owen Farrell.
So in the backs, I think you're saying Farrell. I think you're saying, probably Watson.
I would only say those two initially.
Yeah, and I think you keep Noel there, and I think you keep Daly there because I think they're whilst I feel like they're proven in my mind, in my eyes. I think they've still got with the competition that's there. I think they just need to cement their position, and maybe just need that little bit extra experience. Anthony Watson's been playing for England a little bit longer, so I think they're probably the two backs. Then up front, you've got Mako in the front row.
Yeah, Mako. Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking front row. There's probably no one, but I think Mako's one of them. Second row, like we say, possibly a Toje, but because he is young, maybe you're not as worried. But if you need to rest someone, maybe a Toje, because I think he's probably inked in.
Yeah, I think the big question marks there are, I think a Toje's inked in. I think he's probably the future captain. So on the one hand, it's, do you want him there just for that extra experience because you're ultimately going to make him your captain? Or do you leave him out because at the end of the day, you can only really fully test 3 out of the 4 of them. And if you know that one of them is a definite, then it makes sense to rest that one and take the 3 that you're still trying to work out.
Yeah.
Difficult call. Back row.
Well, Billy, you've got inked in, but you probably want to take him because he's been out.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one because, Rob Shaw's not had a huge amount of game time.
I don't think Rob Shaw's inked him. I think you take them, yeah.
So I think you take them for the experience, and then you have a couple of the youngsters there as well. So, you're probably not leaving any of the back row guys out.
So it's not a huge amount you're leaving out. But
no.
Those sort of 3 or 4 players still, 3 or 4 big players, it still makes a big difference.
It does. I think you probably miss Mako. You miss all of them, obviously. Mako's one that will probably be missed quite heavily. Excuse the pun. I think in the second row, yes, Itoje is key, and if you did leave him out, of course it's a loss. But I don't think that the other 3 between them can't make up that gap. So I don't think you need to worry about that if that's the way you go. Back row we just talked about. You've got the option of your first choice anyway, so there are options there. Farrell, you're always going to miss his boot, but if George Ford is kicking like he did in Argentina, that's not so much of a problem. You've got Daly.
I think Farrell's a huge loss because it's hard to know who you're playing at 12.
How do you mean?
Well, if you're not taking Farrell.
Well, I think if you're not taking Farrell, you've got your Ben Teos who have done it and done it well for the Lions. I don't think you can kind of knock that.
Oh, completely, but it's a slightly different game plan, isn't it?
Yeah, potentially. But then, potentially you're including a Manu Tuolangi. Obviously, with everything that's going on at the moment, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But if he, before the incident at the weekend, Eddie Jones said if he's fit, we will definitely use Manu Tuolangi in the autumn. Well, if you're using a Manu Tuolangi, do you really need 2 playmakers at 10-12?
Yeah.
Because clearly you don't mind the opposition knowing what you're going to do, and that's to stick the ball up Manu's jumper and say, there you go and take on 3 or 4 of them. Just make sure you hold on to the ball.
It'd be nice to see England have that sort of 2 options, to have that playmaker 12, be it a Farrell, even if you take sort of a Slade along to step in. someone to just to have a Malander even.
I think he'll
just to
definitely
see-
take other people. Like you say, the Malander is one we haven't seen yet, but it's definitely it's got to be there or thereabouts. You've obviously got Slade, you've got Lazowski, who also has the potential to slot in there. There are definitely options. And we've talked about the fact that Ben Teo, whilst he's a big big man, he also has some feet. You've got someone like a JJ. I mean, what does JJ offer if you move him inside? Where would he look at Manu? Would he look at him inside or outside?
So from memory, I remember Eddie Jones saying he's always seen Manu as a 12. I mean, I know typically he's been playing 13, but I know Eddie Jones has said he sees him as a 12.
I mean, it creates a lot of problems for Eddie Jones, doesn't it? Because you've got one of the best players in the world in Owen Farrell, who seems to have made it quite clear that he's a 12.
Yeah.
And yet you're looking at someone like a Manu Tuolangi that everyone knows is vitally important if he's fit and firing, who Eddie Jones is saying he thinks is a 12. You've got Ben Teo, who went on Lions duty and did a great job, who's a 12. And all the while you've got George Ford, who for a long time has not been at his best. And yes, he had a great tour down in Argentina, but it was down in Argentina. It'll be interesting to see whether, if George Ford can maintain that form. He's moved to Leicester. He's moved to Leicester,
so he'll be playing with Manu as well.
So that may well, be a real positive for England. But there are big question marks all over the place, like really positive ones. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's going to make those sort of autumn international matches interesting. But we're sort of heading back to Kruiso and the other second row. I suspect the four of them will be part of the autumn internationals, barring injury, etc., etc. Sort of if everything goes to plan, sort of with regards to form, injury free, etc. I actually reckon the four of them might be involved. And it'll be really interesting to see sort of where they are. I think after that, we'll have a really good idea of sort of hierarchy of who's who there. Because I think on paper, if you're saying everyone's fit and everyone's playing to their best, you'd probably go Kruis, Toje and Laws as for free. But Launchbury is just a consistent performer. And I don't think he can be ruled out. And I think amongst the best in the world, as Kruis said about Launchbury, he's got that dog in him that perhaps more than any of the other England second rows. And then this was sort of Kruis saying that, whereas he will just, he'll run into that traffic and just keep battling the whole time. And doing the hard work probably more than the others do, whereas the others might be ready to do be it a Laws doing a big smash or a Toje just the athleticism around the pitch, or a Kruis making a big run, whereas Launchbury will every single breakdown do that dog work. So it's going to be an epic battle.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do? What do you do in this situation, Leon? You've got four guys effectively vying for two positions, three positions.
Yeah,
and there's no clear line dividing them into who an order 1 to 4.
So I like my WWE idea, but that aside, I think you go on form. I think you go on form, and if there's not much to tell on form, you pick.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say. Sorry, mate. Go on.
I was going to say, and we'll go on form and just be confident that you can, and any combination will do the job.
Yeah. So I think you go on form to an extent, or like you say, you do pigeonhole them slightly to an extent, saying, well, if we're coming up against, let's say the Safas, for example, big physical pack, especially you've got the likes of an Etzebeth, perhaps you do want a Kruis over a Launchbury because he's just got that bit more bulk to him, that bit more physical capability. So I think you can do that. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think you can pick on form, but if the form's close enough, you can say, actually, Launchbury's maybe had a slightly better season, but I think Kruis is going to have more of an impact in this game, so we'll go with him. I think that's okay.
I think you have to, really, don't you? You got to be sort of a bit tactical about how you're selecting when. And this is a great problem to have. We keep saying it, but it's 100% it's true. It's a good thing. It just makes life very difficult. Just so something so interesting. We've talked a lot about, and it's just moving away from the second row and Kruis specifically, but we talked a lot about the Curry brothers and their opportunities in the back row. Only Tom Curry was included in the training squad. I don't know if his brother is still injured.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
but obviously what we'd heard was that Tom Curry was actually Ben Curry was actually the better brother on the pitch. I don't know about in life. So yeah, interesting that only the one's been included in the training squad.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I guess it's like you say, if Ben Curry has been injured and sort of out pre-season, he probably hasn't had the chance to showcase himself, has he? Whereas the likes of I know the likes of sort of Sam Underhill were in that. So and what we got to remember, this training squad isn't the elite player squad. It is just get your head around the start of the season, as Eddie Jones has placed it. This is about sort of saying what as an England international, this is what you need to be sort of thinking about this season. This is what you need to be sort of getting your head around, which is interesting. I mean, I don't really know how you place that, because obviously there were the Lions players where he gave them a choice. Sort of quite a few of them gave the choice to sort of stay on their holidays, and some of them only attended one day.
Well, I was just
some of them attended the full part.
Dan Cole was there for Monday only. You had Jamie George and Marrow were there for Saturday only, as was Kyle Sinclair. So in some ways that's quite good. Farrell was the same. In some ways it's quite good for the whole Manu Tuolangi, Denny Solomona situation, because it's not like everyone was there for 3 days, but they were sent home in disgrace. For all we know, this is media rubbish. And actually, Eddie Jones said, "Actually, guys, I've seen enough for this training session. You can go."
That is unbelievably hopeful thinking.
Of course.
I think the truth is, Manu and Denny Solomona went out on the piss and they broke a rule, and it was like, right, piss off.
Sure, but what I mean is, it may not be quite. It may not be quite as big a deal as we're making out, or as the media is making out. It may be that he said, "You want to go out on the piss, guys? That's fine, but you can go home because you're hungover. We don't need you." And it's you that misses out on an extra session. We'll see you at the next one. It may have been done like that, and I think the next training camp is end of September, and then they go away again to Portugal in November, just before the first test, which we will be at, of course. England against Argentina on the 11th of November.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Argentina, Australia and Samoa are our 3 tests this summer. I think we said last week we thought we might be playing South Africa. We are not.
No.
Argentina, Australia, Samoa. So it should be. I mean, Argentina shouldn't be a problem, given that with a very understrength side we did in 2-0. Samoa shouldn't be a problem. Let's just hope there's no major injuries. And Australia haven't been on great form. So I'd like to think that will be. Will that be 5 in a row against Australia if we do that one? Even 6, maybe.
Yeah, at least.
It's always nice to do.
Yeah, and I mean the Aussies don't overly scare me at the moment, but they're still a good, they're still a good rugby nation. Although at the moment their rugby does seem to be suffering somewhat. But I would hope we've got to be favourites for 3-0 from that awesome series.
I would think so. And then suddenly Eddie Jones is, sitting on the back of would that be 5 in a row?
Yeah,
almost as quickly as the record went
away.
How
annoying we lost to Ireland. How annoying.
Yeah, but don't forget that New Zealand lost to the Lions. So they've reset as well. So England, I think, will be back in the lead.
Yeah, I just meant if we had lost to Ireland,
I don't know
we'd be on a huge run.
Oh, ridiculous. Yeah, we said that, didn't we? We said if we can Grand Slam that Six Nations, we should do Argentina 2-0, and then the autumn internationals were looking fairly straightforward as well. So it will be interesting. It'll be interesting because we don't know exactly what sort of teams he's gonna take, and not take, but involve. We don't know how much experience he's going to want, or whether he's going to use this, as he has alluded to, as an extension of the June tour. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
It definitely will. It definitely will. And as we're, I think probably sort of obviously we sort of digressed away from sort of Kruiso a bit, but that's the point of these, isn't it? To sort of look at them in context of the bigger England team as a whole. And speaking of English rugby, that's obviously our women kick off their World Cup campaign as number one in the world and favourites tomorrow against Spain. And we wish them 100% all the best of luck to our England women. And we will be doing a podcast later in the week to cover that match and a bit more about the England women's rugby team, who are quite frankly awesome.
The Red Roses, is it?
Yeah.
I think that's their nickname.
Yeah. But they're a great team, and it's good. Do you know what? I think I said to you last time I saw their highlights play against New Zealand. I quite enjoy watching them play.
Yeah. I mean, there's a long way to go, but you're right. It's good, and it's good to just kind of increase our knowledge of of all things rugby. Not just we're looking towards the World Cup in 2019, but there's a long way to go until we get there, and just we want to get to know England as a rugby nation as well as we possibly can. That's the other purpose of this podcast. So absolutely, that means including looking into the Women's World Cup. And a World Cup, what better time to do it? So there'll be plenty more on that over the course of the next few weeks as we keep an eye on their games and their matches and their progress, and hopefully we can see them go all the way and raise the cup. Although New Zealand ladies tend to put up a bit of a fight at the end, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with regards to this, the awesome foursome in Moreau, I believe we've got next week we've got Joe Launchbury, don't we? Which will be running us through.
Yeah, we will be looking into Joe before heading into the final part of our awesome foursome with, of course, the big man Maro Itoje, or should I say, oh, Maro Itoje.
No, I think as you said it first time was fine, mate, to be honest.
Oh, okay. All right, guys, thanks for listening. As always, we really appreciate your support, obviously. Keep giving it, keep listening, keep enjoying what we're doing if you are enjoying it. If you're not, why are you listening? Go on the website, www.englandrugbypod.com. You can get in touch with us on social media at England Rugby Pod on all the major platforms. And also head over to iTunes, rate us, review us, and if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss another episode.
Yeah, and absolutely. And please do keep getting in touch with us, be it via Facebook. I know that I've had a few chats recently on Facebook with people, including Don from the US. Don, great to have you listening, and sort of also giving your sort of opinion on sort of the US rugby and looking towards 2019 World Cup. We welcome sort of all angles of chats, guys. So please do keep those conversations coming in.
Great. We will see you probably later in the week when we look at the Women's World Cup.
Excellent. Cheers, guys.
Take care.